Hi everybody, welcome to World History. This is actually take two on this video because my computer decided to restart in the middle of the recording of the last one. So here we go again. Let's see. I know I'm already going to need to move my bubble up here. Come along. So here we go again. One click too many. So we're going to have to talk about the idea of total war. This is a focusing of a nation's entire resources into the war effort, and the government takes control of the economy. Essentially, the economies are going to be committed to war production, and we're going to see the government tell certain industries, hey, you're not making this anymore, you're making this instead. Oh, you made pencils? Congratulations, you're now making bullets. Oh, you made lead? Sorry, you're now packing shells. We're going to see the armies of these countries rise into the millions, where their main goal is going to recruit, arm, transport, and supply them as fast as possible. We're also going to have the idea of conscription being introduced, or as some of you may know it, the draft, requiring all young men to be ready for military or other service. We'll also see in a lot of these countries the raising of taxes. People are going to borrow money to help fund the war effort. We'll see a rationing or fixed amount of certain products being available to civilians, especially things like meat, gas, oil, rubber, metals, mainly because those were high-key items needed to support the war effort. We'll see fixed prices so things don't get too expensive as people use rationings. And strikes are going to be forbidden in a lot of places to prevent labor issues because so much of the workforce had already gone off to war, the wartime economies couldn't afford that. So as a result of this, we have a bit of economic warfare play into World War I as well. We'll see Great Britain initiate a blockade around Germany, essentially seal off a place to keep goods or people from entering or leaving, and stopping any contraband from getting in. In this case, contraband was military supplies and raw materials needed to make military supplies, not food and clothing. A lot of times when we think about blockades, you think about everything being stopped. In this case, that's not true. Here we're seeing the stop of anything that could be used for military use, but things like dresses and shoes and fruits and vegetables, those were still allowed to enter into Germany because they didn't want to starve the population. As retaliation, Germany is then going to set up a U-boat blockade around Britain, and they're going to make probably one of the biggest mistakes they could have. In May of 1915, they will sink the RMS Lusitania, which will sink in 17 minutes flat. Now, this was a British passenger liner, and really this was a big shock to a lot of people. Well, at this point in history, for those of you that know history, the RMS Titanic had only sank 3 years prior to this, in 1912. The big kicker that the Germans were not prepared for was 128 Americans died on the Lusitania. That pissed off President Woodrow Wilson, who then threatened to cut off diplomatic relations with Germany. Now, Germany at this point did not want to piss off the United States. That was the last thing that they wanted. So Germany agreed to give warnings and restricted their submarine warfare and, for the most part, stopped attacking passenger ships. Also going to see the rise of propaganda. Now, this was used to control public opinion. It also included some censorship. Propaganda as a whole is the spreading of ideas to promote a cause or to damage an opposing one. We'll see a lot more of examples like these during World War II in a few weeks. Now, this is going to be used to motivate mobilization and put forward atrocities to the public. These are horrible acts committed against innocent people. The aforementioned Lusitania, a lot of British and American propaganda in 1916 and even into 1917 featured the Lusitania, calling for revenge. So, not just men were joining the war effort, women also joined with a lot of pride and confidence. They're going to challenge the idea that women couldn't handle demanding and dangerous jobs by replacing men who left to fight in key war industries, whether that be packing bullets, welding planes together, building tanks. We're also going to see the rise of women's branches of the armed forces, things like the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps in Britain, or WAC. We also see a lot of women sign up to be nurses through the Red Cross. Now, prior to this, the suffragette movement, or getting the right for women to vote, had been pretty popular in Britain and here in the United States. Now, Britain specifically is going to use these efforts to help win the right to vote. Once the United States joins the war, the suffragette movement here is going to kind of be put on hold for a little bit, just for the sake of, there's a war that's a bit more important. We'll come back to this after the war. But eventually morale is going to collapse. In March of 1917, during the St. Petersburg bread riots, the Russian Revolution is going to begin. We'll talk about that next time. We're going to see the full end to the Russian monarchy. Now, the Allies will be hopeful for a democratic government to be established. That's not what we're going to get. We're going to get a communist government under the leadership of Vladimir Lenin, this lovely gentleman right here. We'll talk more about that in section 5. Eventually, Germany and Russia will sign the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, ending Russian participation in World War I, closing the Eastern Front. That freed up Germany to move all their forces to the Western Front. Now, eventually, surprise, the U.S. will join the war on the side with the Allies. Now, there had been a lot of cultural ties with the Allies already. Again, we were British originally. French were also democratic. One of the other big issues, again, aside from Lusitania, was unrestricted submarine warfare as a whole. We didn't like it because a lot of American ships were being sank. Now, the final nail in the coffin that got us involved was the Zimmermann Note, written by German Foreign Minister Arthur Zimmermann, which was sent, well, they tried to send it to Mexico. We intercepted it, saying that if Mexico supported Germany, they would then, after the war in Europe, help them reconquer lost territory from the United States, specifically Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona, basically the southwest part of the United States, if Mexico would fight against us. Yeah, that's not going to end well for Germany. So we declare war, and President Woodrow Wilson, in April of 1917, will say the war against Germany is to make the world safe for democracy. And we'll also earn the moniker, the war to end all wars. Now, that being said, American involvement in World War I is extremely minimal. We declared war in 1917. The war ended in 1918, and we weren't on site until 1918. Now, this was a morale boost to the Allies, mainly because a lot of French and British troops had already been fighting for 3+ years with no relief. Here comes the Americans with relief. Now, at the same time, Wilson put forward the 14 points, a list of terms for resolving this and all future wars. This includes things like freedoms of the seas, free trade, a large-scale reduction of arms by everybody, an end to these secret treaties that caused everybody to join this war, and Eastern European self-determination, or the right of people to choose their own government, and a general association of nations to keep the peace, known as the League of Nations. We'll talk more about the 14 points next time when we do section 4 as well. Now, eventually, victory will be won. Germany will have one last big offensive, but American aid will help push the Allies, help the Allies push the Germans back. Eventually, the German public will fight back and push against the government. Kaiser Wilhelm will step down and go into exile. Austria-Hungary will also revolt against their monarchy. And an armistice will be signed, essentially an agreement to end the fighting. That would go into effect on the 11th month, the 11th day, at the 11th hour. World War I ended. Now, you may realize for us here in the United States, it's another important holiday, Veterans Day. Initially known as Armistice Day, it was initially celebrated for our World War I veterans, but eventually expanded to include all veterans of military service. So, that is it for today. I will, if I can pull my little bubble down here so you can see me. See you all next time. Bye, everybody.